Mm, we have seen several key changes in the past few years at Locarno. Can you say a little bit about this process of transition at Locarno?
Well, um, I should say that the festival is always a festival is always in transition, and the previous artistic director left. They called another one, and I was lucky enough to be selected for such a prestigious and important job. So I would not exactly consider it as a transition. It's simply what's the normalcy of a festival. Some places change, some people come, some people go, some stay.
Mm. I read a variety, and it says that there was a kind of friction between the artistic side and industry side of Locarno in the past few years. And I think this is a kind of becoming a reality in the festival. It's becoming sometimes very tough to handle both aspects. I'm just wondering if you have any kind of thoughts on this kind of friction.
I am not aware of any friction between the so-called artistic side and the so-called industry side. And I'm saying so-called not by chance, because um, cinema is an industry. And also the artistic choices are born within the larger frame of an industry. And this industry has certain rules, and the films are made within the frame of an industry. So I don't understand this friction you are talking about. Maybe, I mean, the author of the article, you should be asking that. I mean, I think that today the festivals, as the way they are structured, they need to be able to have a larger conversation with the ensemble of the factors that are changing. I mean, the audiovisual environment is changing all the time. I mean, and you can't simply, wish it away because you're hiding yourself behind the assumption that you are not part of an environment while you are dealing with the products of an environment. So, I mean, how you cannot be saying that you are not interested in the industry if you are dealing with the films that this industry is producing. It's a kind of nonsense to me. So, I mean, I really don't see where this friction might come from. I mean, I wish for Locarno to be more and more, as it already is, involved in the whole conversation going on in the industry, especially because we are standing up and we are staying up for certain filmmakers and certain films. We need that even more than other festivals. So yes, I mean, and I'm really happy to share with you this good news that Locarno has a new head of industry, which is Markus Dufner, a well-known and much beloved person in the film industry in Europe, and we will be and are already working together in order to shape up a stronger and even more competitive Locarno Film Festival. So from my side, only good news from the industry.
Mhm. And this brings me to the questions about how do you define the Locarno Film Festival? What do you see as a specificity of the festival in the festival world market, and how do you want to make even Locarno bigger?
Well, this is a kind of weird formulation because we just saw what happened to a guy that wanted to make things bigger and wanted to make countries great again. And so I would say, I would rephrase that.
Mm.
And I would say that Locarno has a 74-year long history in championing unknown filmmakers, young filmmakers, challenging filmmakers, in championing eras of forgotten cinemas. Think what Locarno did about the forgotten cinema, censored cinema during the Soviet era. Think what Locarno did with the female filmmakers from Iran that were silenced right after the revolution, and so on. So this is a story I want to be part of. Okay. So the way we can make this conversation be even more relevant is to understand how the industry is transforming itself, how the media is the media cinema, I mean, is changing, evolving, and how the different kind of audiences are trying to insulate themselves in their specific tastes. And the job of a festival is to bring all these kind of audiences together. And this is one thing. The other thing is that a festival cannot exist any longer only in the frame of the 10, 11, 12 days in which it takes place. A festival has to find a way to exist throughout the year in and trying to be present in the conversation the whole year through. So for me, the festival is a real complex editorial proposition. It's not only about what we are doing live during the festival, it's also how we rethink and reinvent our position throughout the year, and how we create a new relationship toward the position of the festival in relation to the wider digital landscape. Nowadays, everybody's talking about we are going hybrid, we are going hybrid. I want to say we are already hybrid, not Locarno itself, but we are already hybrid, because when we, I mean, except now from this ugly Corona times, but when we are answering our phone with an emoji, that's already a digital reaction. When we are writing an email and expressing our feelings or our ideas, that's already a digital form of expressing our ideas. I mean, you're in Canada. Canada gave the world Marshall McLuhan, who's unfortunately is only remembered for the catchphrase, the media is the message. Okay, but there's so much more behind the things that Marshall McLuhan was saying. And one of the things that struck me when I was a kid and I was reading his books, that every transformation in the media landscape reflects and reacts and reinvents a transformation of our central nervous system. And I'm just hoping that Woody Allen does not show up here like in the film and telling me I'm wrong quoting Marshall McLuhan. But what I'm saying is, right now we are not operating anymore as the festival did only 10 years ago.
Mm.
If you go back and you reevaluate what was happening in the festival landscape in 2009, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Mm.
And so to answer your question very briefly and succinctly, I would say I want Locarno to be a part, a substantial part in this ongoing process in which we are redefining what is cinema, what is a festival, and what is a complex and ever-evolving audio-visual landscape.
There is a concern that Locarno wasn't strong enough in the past few years in terms of bringing or attracting big names, and maybe it somehow lost its place at the festival market. What do you think of this? Do you agree with this kind of criticism about Locarno? And if
Oh,
yes,
I don't think that. No, quite honestly, and this is, I hope you will not perceive this answer as a corporate answer from my part. I don't think that Locarno lost his place or was not able to attract big names. I don't think so. I mean, over the years, Locarno established names such as Love Diaz. You might say, well, it's not a big studio name, and you're right, but Locarno was the first festival to award him an extremely high award, the main award. And then Venice followed, Berlin followed, and so on. And not only that, I mean, Locarno has always had its identity, okay? And when Michael Cimino was in Locarno, I don't think that's a small name. When William Friedkin was presenting To Live and Die in LA on the Piazza Grande, I'm not sure that's a small event. Obviously, we are not a behemoth such as other festivals, and you can fill in the blanks, but we are our own festival, we are our own history, and I never felt this, how can I say, this pressure to be, we want to be big, but on our own terms. We want to be glamorous, but on our own terms. We will not be aping other festivals. We will do our own thing. And I hope this does not sound too arrogant or aggressive.
mhm. You have selected a new team of programming. How is this group different from the past team, and what were the main criteria behind their selection?
Well, I wanted to have a diverse group of professionals that could bring their own specific gaze to the work. A group of cinephiles and professionals who were industry savvy, who can navigate their ways in the industry ecosystem. Means that people that understand how the landscape works today, and who have a perception of the movies and the films that are being made today. So the criteria was actually quite easy because I knew what I was looking for. And I was lucky enough to get all the talents and professionals that I was looking for. And, I'm not going to make any names because otherwise I should quote all of them, which I would really love to do, to quote all of them. But when you are putting together a team, you are not only putting together a team of people who know cinema, because that is a given. Okay, you try also to understand if these people would eventually know how to program in a festival. You would eventually ask yourself if these people know let's say, the filmmakers from the region and the productions and so on. I mean, those people are not only cinephiles who sit back and eventually flop their thumbs and say, flip their thumbs and say, oh, good, bad, not sure. I mean, these are people who have a larger understanding of the cinema landscape and of the, what I was calling a couple of minutes before, the audiovisual transformations. So yeah.
Mhm.
For me today, if I might just add something, um, I'm a film critic. I have written several books on films. I'm still writing about cinema and so on. But for me today, to program films in a festival is the form of film criticism par excellence.
Mhm.
And
Uh,
to do that, you need to know not only about films.
mhm. And this brings me to the questions about what do you define as a good film? What will be the main criteria for the film selection team under the new programming group?
Well, that's a very easy question to answer. I don't know. Because if I would know, the process of looking for films would resemble basically to the collecting of images that I have somehow gathered in my mind, and I'm trying to find all the time some images that recall the ones that I have already in my mind. So I really don't know, because when I'm out there looking for films, I am not looking for things that appeal to my taste. I'm looking for things that surprise me.
Mhm.
And this is something that I have been trying to do as far as I can remember. I mean, you are Iranian. I'm not trying um, to please you or to be smug or smart with you. But when I saw Kaywan's Karimi's first feature film, Drum, it didn't resemble anything that came from Iran. Black and white film, almost 2 hours, taken from a book that is now considered controversial, shot almost in the shadows of the official permits, and still incredibly stylish. And it looked like a forgotten masterpiece from Germany from the
Mhm.
20s, you know. So I had never seen a film like that. And I could have never imagined that something like that could have existed. And this is the why it ended up in Venice in the Critics Week. I
Yeah,
was not I was not looking for a film that looked like something that I knew already.
that's very good because coming back to the question of Iranian cinema, I know that there were concerns that in the past few years, Locarno never tried to get any Iranian film, mostly because festivals or organizations thought that Iranian directors are not enough rebels, are not enough politically engaged. So it seems that Locarno was more interested in kind of political films from Iranian directors, but apparently under your management, for you most important thing is the cinema and it's and having something new to say or define.
Yes, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, I'm really not about. Years and years ago, I was talking to the revered Youssef Shaheen, filmmaker from Egypt,
Mm.
and we were evaluating, and he was extremely critical about the way festivals selected non-European or non-Western filmmakers. So I'm not going to repeat what he said because it was very blunt, and he still felt a bit about it. So what I'm saying is, Serge Danet used to say that a film is a kind of a postcard. Serge Danet, the revered critics from the
Yeah.
Cahiers du Cinéma, and he said, it's a kind of a postcard that someone sends to someone else saying, hey, I'm fine, I'm doing this, how are you? And you react to that. It's the principle of playing tennis in Godard's mind. So for me, what I'm trying to look for are extremely personal postcards sent by filmmakers who want to get in touch with other people. I'm not interested in, sometimes we say hello to certain people because we have to, but we don't mean it because either we are in a hurry or whatever. But sometimes you meet someone and you feel that that person wants to establish a real connection, a meaningful connection. And that's where we react. That's where I react. And the people that I had the chance and luck to choose to work with the festival are all moved by the same desire to meet someone.
And in terms of gender representation, because there are some festivals that, for example, like Venice, that sometimes says that for us, quality of art house is more important than who made the films. And there are festivals like Sundance who extremely in terms of 50-50 in terms of selecting film. What will be the new Locarno under your management?
Well, let's put it simply. I mean, you can see it from the selection committee and the advisors, what I think about that. And if you go and check what other people wrote about the selection of the Critics' Week in the last 5 years, you will also find an answer about the gender representation. For me, it's quite simple, even though the questions and the conversation at hand is very complex. The first 100 years of cinema, we can create a period, you know, it's like art. If you consider the evolution of Western art in the West, you can say, I mean, from the Middle Ages up to Picasso, you can cut it down and you can point out, okay, this is what, this happened because other things were happening, you know, the usual. So for me, it's not an issue if we say that the first 100 years of cinema have been mostly white, heterosexual, male, and Western, because that's the way the industry developed in the so-called advanced economies. The real challenge is today, how we are going to work in order to make cinema more inclusive. How are we going to work towards images that will be representing not only white heterosexual persons, Western persons, but also the rest of the world, which is the largest part. So that's the real challenge. And I think it's mainly an economical challenge because cinema is an economic industry, but it's also an issue of how are we talking about it today? What are the language structure that we are using while addressing these issues? Where lies unconscious bias? How do we look at the world today? So these are all conversations that are extremely important to have, because otherwise we will repeat the same structures of representation. And I think nowadays it's extremely interesting because there's a lot going on. And there are a lot of films that address and try to give some partial answers to those questions. I mean, I don't think we, how can I say, it's so refreshing to see that assumed ideas are being challenged and questioned. Mm-hmm. It's so refreshing to see that the concept itself of intersectionality creates a different conversation. And this conversation can help us broaden our moral imagination. So I think that I am really interested in looking forward to how this whole conversation will help us make a better festival.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a little bit about your attention to the kind of new cinema or experimental cinema, and there is a concern that Locarno in the past showed too much attention to experimental cinema in determinant of narrative cinema. Will you continue this tradition?
Well, we need to first of all to understand what are we talking about when we talk about experimental cinema. I hope I will not shock you, but some of the best Transformers film made by Michael Bay are quite experimental in my book. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it really comes down to the film, because you can have filmmakers who are extremely experimental, but are also extremely extremely narrative, extremely interesting, refreshing, such as Bertrand Mandico, which is one of my favorite filmmakers ever, I would say. So if I have a great deal of respect for experimental cinema. That said, I am not bound to, I'm not bound to repeat what's already been done in the past. I would really like to create a community of filmmakers and the audience that can share communal experiences. And again, if I may just reference briefly the work that I did in Venice, those films that I had the opportunity and the luck to select are films that were narrative, had specific visual and narrative and formal identities, but managed to create a very fruitful and fascinating dialogue with the audience. So for me, that is something that I'm looking for, and I hope this makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, this artificial division between narrative cinema, experimental cinema, commercial cinema, underground cinema, what are we even talking about? Is Stranger Than Paradise experimental cinema? I wouldn't say so. It looks to me like a wonderful classic. And that film premiered in Locarno. She's Gotta Have It, Spike Lee's first film. Is that experimental?
Mhm.
I don't think so. But it's a classic today. So for me, it's really about this, a filmmaker like Denis Villeneuve, who's working at the heart of the industry. And he keeps making extremely personal films. And his films, even though extremely successful, do not pay slavishly respect to the rules of the tentpole movies.
Mhm.
There's a filmmaker who is both extremely experimental in the way in which he tries to find new ways of conveying emotion and stories. There's a filmmaker who manages to speak to the largest audience possible and still be highly poetic and personal. So there's a real challenge, not to speak only to 15 people, uh,
Mhm.
quite honestly.
Mhm. And with the arrival of a vaccine, how do you think of this year festival? And how do you think it is reasonable to think of having a kind of physical event?
Well, if everything goes according to plans, the vaccine by in the next 4 or 5 months will be widely available. We are planning as Locarno a physical experience. We are already organized around hosting 50% of the usual festival attendance. And we are already putting in place all the safety protocols that will help us enhance safety for the health of the audience. So for us, it is possible to have a festival in those situations. And Venice and San Sebastian this year showed that it is possible to have a festival where no one gets infected, everybody can enjoy the films and still have a physical event. So I think that is completely possible. The real issue here is that if we keep on talking about the masks are robbing us of our civil liberties, then we are going nowhere. Then the virus will never go away. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, if some, luckily this seems to be in the past, but a couple of months ago, we could see people that claim that to carry a gun in public spaces is their God-given right, but God forbid if you ask them to wear a mask
Mm.
and see where that got us, you know, or where it got the states. So, you know,
Mm.
I think it is possible to have a festival also in this situation.
Mm.
Venice, San Sebastian, and also Locarno showed it is possible.
Okay. And the past years was a very troubling year for many of the filmmakers. So I'm wondering, do you have any specific plan to support filmmaking activities this year in the face of Corona? Or are there any kind of new initiatives that you are
We
currently
did
working?
that. We did that already last year with the program, with the special program, The Films After Tomorrow, where we were financially supporting uh, films that were stopped by the pandemic. So we did that already. And many of the films that we supported are being presented now to festivals for consideration. So that was a wonderful thing that the festival did. We have our Open Doors program that supports already festival all over the world. And we have our Locarno Academy that supports already a young filmmaker and helps them put their projects on their feet. So we are doing that already. We did not wait for the pandemic. We were doing that already.
Mhm.
And we will keep on doing that.
Mhm. Okay, thanks. It was great talking with you and to know more of your vision about the Locarno. At the end of, I wonder if there is anything left that you want to discuss.
I wish that from Iran could come more films such as Careless Crimes.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. And this is something very beautiful to hear it from you.
Mokri is a wonderful talent. Mokri is a wonderful talent. He's a great, 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 great director, and I hope make he will be making some more films as bold and beautiful and challenging, such as Careless Crimes. So, I mean,